Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Biz Meds. We are your hosts. My name is Saad.
And my name is Darris.
In our last podcast, we helped kind of answer some questions on why we are neuroscience business coaches and not just business coaches. And one of the things that we constantly keep talking about, and I'm sure, some people still have a lot of questions about the flow state. And the reason why we talk about the flow state and why it's so interconnected with neuroscience is because they both, it's interconnected. They're both
Positive psychology and neuroscience are basically interconnected at what flow state is.
Absolutely.
And that's why, we want to talk more about what is flow state, what makes it up, why is it important, why do we continue to attach our identity and our main core offerings around the neuroscience and psychology of flow, and why that is such an important part for business owners versus, here's just another system or whatever it is. Like, why is this the key main driver of everything we talk about? Why do we keep coming back to this versus some of the other topics that we could talk about?
Yeah. So we've talked about what the flow state is before. We've talked about how to get into the flow state. Now let's today talk about the neuroscience attached to the flow state.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the neurochemicals, the actual chemicals that are happening. But I think we should go back and re-examine what specifically, so when people are actually, they don't have to go find it again. We're just going to keep talking about it. So what is flow state? What is the formula for peak performance, and how does it apply to business owners?
Yeah.
Where do you want to start?
Let's start about what the flow state is.
What flow state is?
What is the flow state in two sentences?
In two sentences. I mean, it's really I think anyone could think back to a time where you were completely in the zone. Time disappeared. You just felt so in the zone, so focused on what here and now. And it's like you couldn't make a mistake. Everything was you just knew, and you did, and you executed effortlessly. And you were it was like the singular, highest peak performance time you've ever had. And so I think if you look back in your lifetime, think about something like that. What matches that? What activity were you doing that matches that? And I guarantee everyone I've actually spoken to, when we explain it like that, can pinpoint to the time where they felt that.
For me, it wasn't, it was never what I associate that to was never the task. It was more so noticing that I was never paying attention to the time passing me by, but more how productive I was and how quickly I was moving through, only to realize that a lot of time has passed by.
Yeah, and so that's an interesting part of flow state, where you either have time dilation, so time it expands, so it feels like it took a really long time comparatively, or you have time constriction, so time seems to compress, and it felt like that amount of time just happened so quickly. So that's an interesting part of the experience of flow state. So it could be whatever. And so you talked about productivity, but for a lot of people, there's going to be probably the experience of they were doing some type of activity. Maybe it was skiing or snowboarding or some type of sport or reading or maybe playing video games or something like that, which are kind of really prone or high flow propensity activities. So even video games, things like that. And the interesting thing about flow state is there are both positive and negative sides to flow. So we choose to always focus on what can you do with the positive impacts of flow, because flow is just a biological state. And neuroscience and your biology scaling, but you can do, you can actually be in a flow state getting into crime and performing crime, because you're getting a lot of the same neurochemical cocktail and things that are happening. And it's great. It feels good just for the sake of doing it. Versus our stance is we're going to use it for good,
Yeah.
and just one could argue Or someone could say that, hey, well, I get into a flow state playing video games, and that's great, because part of the idea of flow, or how we describe flow, is it's just the act of being in flow is rewarding in and of itself. So it's called autotelic. So the experience is rewarding, because now you're just filled with all of these really great neurochemicals, and we'll talk about that maybe in a second, that it just feels really good. Now we want to leverage and harness that so that we can apply it regularly at will to the most important things in our business. And instead of, having where we're trying to get people to scale our personality, like we talked about before, is we want to help them scale their biology to be in that peak performance state at will and achieve the most important things.
Yeah, it's funny because like every time we talk about this, I have all of the memories like flooding right into my mind about like, I remember going through the flow state and such experience, flow state, such and such experience. Like, and there's probably a lot of viewers that like when they're listening to it, they can relate to those feelings and those memories, but they don't know how to get back into it ever again.
Exactly.
And it's funny where you say that, people that are, let's say like a bank heist or whatever, right? Like they're able to only get into flow when they're like robbing a bank or something, right?
The thing is, they probably don't even realize
exactly,
they're in flow
right?
doing it. All they know is, like that for them is a really
exactly. And the reason why I say that is because like then they think, oh, this is the only thing I'm good at because this is the only time I'm so locked in and so focused, right?
Yep.
And same thing with people that play video games is like, throughout the day, they just are never focused on any task, and all they can think about is playing the video game because they're so good at it, and, they're locked in, right? So, and the reason why when you're saying all those things is until I learned how to get into it with all of the other different types of tasks, not just like being able to do it for video games or doing it for like a project, like anything I wanted to get into and utilize that is where now I'm like, well, if only people knew that this is not just limited to certain things.
Exactly. And that's the real key. I'm so glad you brought that up, because people have this, first of all, when you hear flow state, it's really interesting hearing how people associate that flow activity. And part of our job is to help people, and specifically entrepreneurs and business owners, realize that we can leverage that peak performance state for you and your business and help you condense time frames by utilizing that, leveraging and scaling your own biology. What is tier 1 operators in special forces, they talk about flow state a lot. And because they are so locked in, they're so focused, they have very clearly defined goals, right? So they achieve a personal, flow state. But then there's another part we talk about in our 1 Month 8 program about, we don't go into it too much, but we also bring it up, is that there is such thing as group flow. You can get into a group flow. And when you have many people all operating the same thing, and they can get into a group flow like that. So think of Navy SEALs, Delta Force, things like that. Like they're so highly tuned that they achieve group flow on top of that, and they have flow state. And again, it's, flow can be leveraged in so many different areas. It's okay, we're going to help business owners like dial it in, because in that, there's been multiple studies that show your creativity and productivity skyrockets to the tune of over 500%. So if you have that kind of creativity and productivity being unleashed, you're absolutely going to achieve more than you ever thought possible.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to hold back. Yeah, I had to hold my laughter back there because, you were. I thought in your examples of like the Navy SEALs, the Special Forces, you're gonna drop like a spin class or something in there. Because it's actually, you know what? I'm not trying to, belittle it or laugh at it, but there are people that, only go to spin classes because they are in the group flow mentality where everybody is, writing off of each other's like,
well, that's just further supports that idea of group flow. And you can, it it's just an enjoyable experience. So most people can do that. And you can get trapped in the idea of being a flow junkie. So you just love being in flow. It doesn't matter what the activity is. And so we want to really use it in a purposeful, leveraged way to help you grow your business and scale faster than you ever thought possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think just a little bit about the
neurology.
Well, yeah, the neurochemicals that go in. So I think we've covered it in the past, but like the main 6 neurochemicals are going to be dopamine, norepinephrine, endorphins, anandamide, serotonin, and oxytocin. Like those are going to be your main neurochemicals involved in that. And we spend a lot of time talking about dopamine, you know, that the molecule of more. So there's a lot of that. And why dopamine is really important is that it can help kind of, you know, we get dopamine blasts all day from our cell phones or whatever it is, right? The really short-term wins. But when we're in flow, we can actually leverage dopamine to get deeper into flow. And that's really interesting. Those 6 neurochemicals are really potent. You know, we talked about, I think a couple episodes back about NZT from, you know, that the magic limitless drug. And like, but that's really our own brain's concoction of NZT. Like those are the neurochemicals that are all kind of happening at the same time. And why it's neurochemically intensive is because you're burning 6 different neurochemicals all while you're in this flow state. And that's why you need to also prioritize rest. That's part of the actual flow cycle. And so if we're talking about flow cycle, you know, there's obviously, you know, to get into flow, there's the struggle, release, flow, and recovery. Like that's the flow cycle. And that's always what's going to happen. You can't bypass the cycle. You can't shortcut it. You can't just get into flow and like, oh, I've been in flow for 3 days. That does not happen. It's impossible to be in flow for 3 days. But
I want a flow marathon.
And that's really important because when you look at the cycle of, you know, and then we talk about the formula, well, that just means it's a recurring pattern. So it's easy to replicate, but they're part of the things that are going to get you into flow. So there's flow triggers. There are also things that are going to prevent you from getting into that state when those are the flow blockers. And one of the biggest flow blockers that people are going to have is cognitive load. Cognitive load, unclear goals, things like that. So they're not actually in a place where they have the capacity. Their cognitive load is so high that it's going to prevent them from getting into flow so much, which is why we developed the free masterclass, was to, as we were working with people, like, oh, wow, we're spending a lot of time just trying to reduce cognitive load to help people get into flow. So let's just make this available. Like, here's the precursor. This is going to be the first step that's going to help you peel back all the things that are going to prevent you from getting into flow to make it much easier. And then we can now spend our time on the most important thing, is building the skill of continually being able to get into flow state. And how do you get into a deeper flow state?
Yeah. It's, again, like when you break down the chemicals that way, it's obviously like helps understand like why people do what they do, and, you know, how to have those work in your favor. And one of the biggest things like people are afraid of is, not really afraid of, or just aren't aware of the fact that you can actually leverage them, just as you said, to do things you never thought you would like doing. And it's a funny thing because, like, you know, I joke about this with some of my friends, is like, it's a lot easier to want a super delicious cheesy pizza than to go work out for an hour and a half. But the dopamine hits and the results and like the feeling of fulfillment you get after the hour and a half long workout, you'll never match that with a cheesy pizza.
Well, I don't know, man. There's some really good cheesy pizza.
Yeah, but like
from Italy,
have you?
The right cheeses.
That's fair. But those pizzas also just don't hit you the same way.
Oh,
yeah.
Not at all.
I'm talking like North American pizza.
Yeah, and that really comes down to, like, when we look at flow trigger, even though that, you know, for that example, it's, you could have, like, that's a friction thing. right? Yeah, it's really easy. It's super easy. You just pick up your phone, grab an app, order pizza, it's done, right? Versus, oh, I haven't done the work of looking at what I need to do to make the friction to go work out super easy and have the friction to order pizza much greater. And I've talked about this example before where I actually take the batteries out of my TV remote control and I put the remote control up, and then I take the batteries and put them in my office. And just that amount of friction there is a huge, it's enough friction to make me, when I think about going to watch TV, I'm like, oh, I gotta go get the remote control. I have to go get the batteries. And I'm like, I will probably do something that's just probably better for me, which is read, feed my pattern recognition system, or do something else, or help break down some of my other goals so that I'm reducing friction in another area to help with that.
Yeah.
And then, that feeds a whole other thing of flow triggers. So having clear goals and things like that's really important.
Right. Yeah. It's actually very interesting that you do that, because I've never really thought about it that way, but I guess like those are the things you have to do to break your pattern.
Yeah.
And
it's even reading. So it's how do you set yourself up? So I have a goal of reading so much per day. Like, what is the point I can reduce the friction? So one of it was, I love physical books. They're just not always easy to have handy, and especially with the selection that I love to read at any given time. So I invested in Kindle. And then when I make sure when I go to bed, it's literally like on the bed beside me. So as soon as I wake up early in the morning and I can see, I can fire my Kindle on, and the first thing I do is read. And I check that off my list right off the bat.
Yeah, that's actually true, because I do also like an actual physical book, and it also serves as a quote unquote trophy by the time when you're done. It's like, got that checked off, right? But it is a bit of a chore when you think about it, like when you're trying to read when you get right out of bed, going to go find the book.
Yeah.
Now you're up, like, all right, well, I gotta do something else first before I go read. And then it constantly gets pushed back and back and back.
Yeah.
So,
because that friction, it just becomes, it's little, and specifically in the morning where you're tired and you're more apt to convince yourself that, I can't do that. Or it's like, I need 5 minutes versus, it's right here. It's ready to go. I just have to do this. And that can make it easy.
Yeah.
So it works out fantastically well. Yeah. And that's kind of for a lot of things, right? Just, it's that friction, but it's also, how do you make that part easy? How does it support your bigger goals?
Setting yourself up for that success.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so with that, we'll continue to talk about flow state, because like when we talk about the neurochemicals like that, we talk about it not because, you need to know specifically. Some of the people might really dive in, love the neuroscience part of it, right? In which case I say, like, there's a lot of research out there on flow, which is where you can kind of dive into more of that. Yep. And then what happens specifically in the brain is that when you're in a flow state, so we talk about struggle phase, and every time you go into flow, like, there has to be a struggle phase. So it gets hard. And that's where, we've talked about it a lot of times previously, is, you could be endlessly stuck into a struggle phase, because specifically when you're trying into flow state, like, you have to be focused. You have to remove all of your distractions, which is another kind of key point. Like, so you can manage your physical environment around you to remove distractions. So, we teach a lot about, in our program, in your physical environment, how do you set up ways to remove the distraction? And one of the key things of doing that is you don't even bring your phone in, and you don't open your phone, you don't look at it. So that reduces the temptation to then re-distract yourself with something else. And that's really key in a struggle phase, is that, because if you start to go through the struggle phase and then you distract yourself, well, then you start at the very beginning of that. And in the early stages of learning flow, like, your struggle phase was going to be longer because it feels uncomfortable, and you're worried, and suddenly there's like, I'm struggling with this, until you hit that release phase. And as you develop the skill of flow, then that you'll start to know what your triggers are that help you release.
Yeah.
Which might be, oh, I'm feeling a struggle. And so I just do a session where I'm just stare at a wall and I just do some box breathing or some breath work, different types of breath work to help re-regulate, but also then to take my mind off of things. And that release will then drop me immediately into a flow state. And that's a key thing. And then at the end of my flow state or my amount of flow time that I have, I'm going to build in a recovery and rest period, active recovery that helps recharge the neurochemicals I've spent, which is going to include probably some type of nutrition, some active recovery. So I might like a walk or something like that. It's not going to be TV and a beer, and that's not active recovery. Things that are just really, really about that. And so that is the common formula that you have to do. And there's a lot of things you have to really just understand how that works. And then you just get better at it. It's like building any skill. Is the more you do it, the more you know how to do it, like the easier it gets. And we have clients that we've been working with for a while, and now they have, a year of being able to schedule and execute their 1 month days. And they get better and better and better all the time because they're developing the skill of getting into flow and the most leveraged activities in those flow states.
Yeah. I mean, so sorry, the reason why I side like this is because most people that are in this space see this as oh man, another thing I need to spend time and learn.
Yes.
And it's partially true.
Yeah.
But the truth about that truth is, if you have something that is going to help you get from A to B a lot faster, would you do it? Everybody's going to say yes, right?
Well, I mean, you would hope that they would.
Yeah, exactly, right? But sometimes people are just not willing to even try it.
Yes.
Or give it I like to say the self-investment, invest in your own betterment and the skills.
What do you feel is the driver behind that?
And wanting to.
And not wanting to.
And not wanting to?
Yeah. Versus wanting to versus not wanting to.
Friction behind the effort it's going to require to better yourself.
Yeah.
But those are the people we're not talking to in the first place.
I get that. And I guess for the benefit of everyone, where do you believe that root cause is? Where's that root? What's that
just
rooted
work.
in?
Just work. People don't want to put in the effort. People want the silver bullet like we talk about.
Yeah.
It's nobody. So I grew up with this philosophy that the day you stop learning is the day you've died.
Well, I think you just nailed it, right? You said the key word, which is learning.
Yeah.
And so it's a learning and growth mindset versus a fixed and judger mindset.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, right? So the ones that want to learn and are humble enough to want to learn new skills and can recognize that, they will learn it, versus the ones that they don't have any desire to learn more, right? They're happy living in their little box, and their box is the box that they'll exist in forever. And hopefully not, but that's how it rolls. Yeah.
And it's kind of sad at the same time, and it makes me worry about humanity as a whole, but that's another rabbit hole that we can go down.
That was a very existential
it's because the more you think about it, the more my brain immediately starts going to well, shit, it's. And in our last podcast, I was calling it a lost art, right? Because more and more people are not interested or don't have the commitment or the desire to do it. That group is getting smaller and smaller.
Well, I think that is just a
Sorry, I don't mean to do a whole doom and gloom type of thing.
No, it's a valid
concern
perspective. I think what makes it worse is that, we talked about it, we continue to talk about it, is that we have devices and applications and a lot of things that are designed to continually interrupt, distract, and capture our attention. And so for a long period of time, that's happened. And so it is a lost art, our ability to focus and put our attention on the right things is greatly diminishing. And so I can see how that would make you believe that, right? Which is, again, our mission out there is why we associate the way we do. It's why we differentiate ourselves the way we do. It's why we've realized what the true crisis is in this day and age. It's not your ability to grow a business. It's you don't even know how to get your focus and actually execute on a thing. You don't know how to cultivate a mindset and behaviors that are supportive of that because you've been hijacked for so long. You are the proverbial Duracell batteries in the Matrix. You've been plugged in for so long. You don't even realize that there is a life that exists outside that existence that is actually way more powerful, will get you to where you need to go. And so, whether or not you agree with that analogy, fuck, I don't give a shit. But that's really what it is. You've been plugged into this thing for so long, you don't even realize that the veil has been pulled over your eyes. And we're here to pull that thing back and say, no, look, you don't even realize that you're living in this dream world, that you are distracted and that you don't know how to focus anymore. And we're going to continue to break that open so you understand that here's how you get that back. Does it require work and investment in yourself? 1,000,000% it does. But here's why that's so important. So a little jump into the world of why flow and what flow is and why we continue to talk about it versus maybe always talking about a system or something like that. Yeah. Because this is the key. This is the foundation block where all of that gets unlocked for you.
Yeah.
But at a speed far greater than you ever thought possible.
Exactly. Yeah. And, that's why it's important. When I first experienced it, I didn't really care about the neuroscience piece of it up until after I was past it, that I was like, oh, okay, that's how this is all connected.
Yeah. So hopefully we were able to give you a bit better insight of why and what we do and why it's so important for you as a business owner and be able to take that away and start to leverage that in your world. So again, if you've been listening, you've been with us for a long time and you haven't signed up for the free masterclass, the neuroscience-based masterclass to reclaim your cognitive load and able to get you into flow, well, then the link is down below. Whether or not you're on Apple, whether or not you're on YouTube or Spotify, it's all there in the show notes and the links below. So get on it now. And if you've been with us for a long time, thank you. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you. If you just joined us, I'm Darris.
My name is Saad.
This is Biz Meds. We are here to give you the minimum effective dose for your business. And remember, Mom, I love you. Saad's mom, I love you. We love you. Thank you for continually showing up. Everyone, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Remember, you are just one day away from the life you've always dreamed about. We will see you in the next episode.